everybody, my name is Jin Moon and welcome to iHome Church. For those of you joining us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our email list. This last week has been an incredible week in that my two younger sisters, Kat and Vic, received the holy blessing together with their now newly minted husbands, Jan and Joe. So again, congratulations to both couples. We know that it was also a week where many of us spent time in remembrance of the attack on the Twin Towers on 9/11. And it really represents the religious war at its worst. And the terrorist attack on the shores of New York City really took this country by surprise, and I'm sure made us think about the meaning of life and where does peace stand in our world, or where can we find peace. And I'm sure that we've been doing a lot of soul searching, thinking about all those thousands of lives that were lost. And my father has always been that champion of peace building. And when he thought about these religious wars or wars based on theological differences, and we've spent centuries and countless time wasted in different conversation, never really resulting on any kind of concrete result that we're all looking for. But my father always felt that the answer to all of these conflicts in the world is really true love. And so knowing that great animosities exist amongst religions, between countries, and many times between different classes of people and different economic backgrounds, he really encouraged the brothers and sisters that joined the unification movement to seek an international blessing. And in that way, through the bonds of love that are created through the holy blessing and through holy matrimony, each family that are bound together through their son and daughter can come to really appreciate the other, or the other background, the other religion, or the other culture that is brought into the family through the marriage, and in that way heal great sources of hatred and animosity and misunderstanding that exists between many different types of people living in our world today. And so when I heard the great news that my two younger sisters got married, I was incredibly delighted because, you know, unlike the other weddings that took place in the true family, we're not talking about my sisters getting married to Koreans, or, you know, children of established leaders in the movement, let alone second gen, those that were born within the movement. But, you know, their blessing represents the breaking down of all types of barriers. And for some, the type of barriers that many have thought can never be broken. And my sisters have gotten blessed to people who are not of our faith. And so, in one sense, it's extremely exciting in that it opens up a whole new world for a lot of people seeking the blessing. But on the other hand, I am sure it is extremely frightening and terrifying to people who felt very comfortable in the strict confines of our church, or the strict framework. Second gen, blessed to second gen, that's it. It sounds awful, but there is certain kind of a comfort in knowing where your boundaries are. And, you know, marriage is forever, and therefore no matter what, you just stick together. And there's a great deal of comfort in believing that and trying to live your life according to that. But the thing is, not everybody fits into that picture. Not everybody gets, for instance, gets a spouse that you can grow together with, that you can work together with, or that you can build an ideal family with. And not everybody wants to play it safe in terms of marriage. If we are really going to preach one family under God, there are many in our faith that wants to seek the other from somewhere outside the framework of our church. And I know that has been a source of great conflict and great suffering to many parents who are dealing with what we do with our children. Our children do not want to get married to somebody who was born in the faith. What do we do if a second gen wants to marry a non-second gen, a first gen, or a Jacob's child, somebody who grew up in the church because their parents joined the church, but were not born after their parents were blessed, and therefore is called Jacob's child? And what do you do in this situation? It's been a source of bitter conversation between the parents and children, and especially when I was overseeing the Unification Church of America. Certainly, I've had lots of conversation with parents on this exact topic or on this exact issue. And my recommendation or my advice to the parents back then has always been, do you want to lose a child or do you want to gain a new family? There are certain things that we need to be cognizant of. We don't have equal number of boys versus girls when it comes to second gen. So are we basically saying if we don't allow second gen to be blessed to any child other than second gen, then some will not be blessed at all? Is that what we were going for? Or, do we always have to lose our child or disown our children because they are marrying somebody outside the faith? Well, one thing to consider and to really kind of take to heart is that the issues that we as the unificationists are confronted with in our growing movement, our issues and our problems are not just ours alone. Christianity has had exactly the same transitional issues that they've had to deal with. And, when the Christians started having children and they wanted their children to be married to other Christian children, but then, what if your child, a Christian, wants to marry a Gentile, somebody who was born outside the faith? I mean, these issues and the question of admission of Gentiles into the Christian church was incredibly traumatic for early Christians. And there was a great deal of heated conversation that took place. And certainly it was an extremely difficult issue that the Christians had to deal with. And when they recognized that in order to really embrace the world, that they had to open up the church and their family, Christian family, to the Gentiles, that's when the floodgates opened for Christianity. And it grew exponentially. And likewise, when Father talks about the Pacific Rim era, about the coming of women leadership, and about the need for the floodgates to open, to embrace all of the world's people through the beauty and the grace of the blessing, it's not, I don't think it's a coincidence that we are dealing with the same issues in our movement today. And so the blessing of Messiah's first family to not just embrace a non-Korean, but a non-church member into the true family is an incredible statement. And it really affords great hope for all of God's children to be a part of God's family. And so I know that some people are extremely happy, but a lot of people might be a little bit scared. What does this mean for my children? What does this mean for us as a family? And if we have more freedom that is afforded to us, what does that mean for those of us who have just literally clung on literally clung on to our faith and clung on to our marriage and never really had the time to develop the kind of proper relationship that a loving spouse needs to have towards each other? Or what about some of us who never really had the time to properly develop a loving relationship with our children? How do we take our family through this process? Well, I always say that with greater freedom always comes greater responsibility. And so this is really going to be a challenging time, in that it's wonderful news that our children and our grandchildren in the faith will have more options, and things will be much more flexible in terms of getting to the altar of the blessing than it has been before. But for those of us who have been, fighting and struggling and clinging on for dear life through the age of the wilderness, now that we're entering the age of the settlement, might feel like, what's going to happen if I don't have these strict guidelines or my crutch to cling on to? Well, this is really kind of a time when God is asking all of us, don't just be like children, or don't just think of church as something that you're addicted to, that you cannot live without, but be a person of your own worth and of your own value, so that we can stand on our own 2 feet, being the responsible sons and daughters of God, and participate in the process of the blessing, and have a chance to really decide on that important day, with the guidance of our parents, to really understand the gravity of the commitment and come to a decision together, but ultimately own that decision, the husband and wife, so that we can have the best starting point in terms of preparing for building and working together with each other to build ideal families and to raise great children. So I find it quite interesting that my youngest sister Catherine, her Korean name means March of Beauty, and the youngest sister, her Korean name means March of Heart. So in this international blessing, where Yeonjin is matched to a German gentleman and Chongjin is matched to an Italian gentleman, it's really a vision of beauty and heart, in that in their blessing picture, shall we say, we have the beauty of God's children, in that different backgrounds are represented. And we have the representation of God's heart, in that we all belong to one family under God. So for me, it's an incredible step forward. And now we have an example in the first family of the Messiah. We have different nationalities. We have an example of first gen, and of course Mother before Foundation Day gave a special blessing to my sister Eunjin, and so we have an example of a first gen coming into true family. And so all of these heated debates that have gone on when I was responsible for HSA between parents and their children, you cannot marry outside, you can only marry second gen, and all these heated debates really needs to be kind of put into perspective. And when it happens in true family, then it's a great precedent for those seeking the same direction in the church. And for me, I've always felt that the Messiah's first family, if we are all talking about and proclaiming one family under God, that for it to be all Korean, would be a disservice to God, in that really the Messiah's first family should represent God's family. And therefore we should have children from all different nations all around the world. And now, whether we like it or not, that's the way it's looking. And that's the way it's coming to be. So, you know, when I did my, with my father, my third with my father, talking about how my father was ahead of his time, I thought that it was only 15 years, slightly more than 15 years ago, but we always tend to think that we're younger than we really are. But I realized that my conversation with my father took place more than 22 years ago. And my father back then wanted the True Family to go international, and but there was a great deal of resistance on all levels. And so my father's original intention had to be postponed. But the incredible thing about God is it doesn't matter whether the people are prepared or not. If that's what God wants, it's gonna get done. And for those of us who might have questions about, you know, whether God is really together with us or behind us, you know, just reread the divine principle and look at providential history. God has always been there all along. And again, I see the evidence of God working mysteriously in the lives of the True Family and in the midst of this incredible movement that we call the Unification Church. And so, you know, when we tackle the difficulty of really opening up our doors to allow people that we're not comfortable with inside, it's good for the people in the house. And I think when I think about, you know, the church, and when I think about many times the second gen born within the church, many times we tend to be insular in that we just stick to ourselves and we only think about ourselves. You know, we only need to get blessed and live our own happy lives, and that's fine for us. I don't really need religion. I don't really need true parents. I don't need anything because I got what I needed from the church. I got the blessing and now I'm happy and I'm going about our lives. But the beauty of these international blessings is that it takes us over and above and beyond what we are in our own little happy little state. And it kind of compels us to think about the other. It compels us to think about something connecting to a larger vision or a larger understanding of our lives. And I think in order for us to really be that inspired, that incredible sons and daughters of God, we kind of have to be able to balance, you know, the details of everyday life with a larger vision. You know, we need to think globally, but deal with and act locally. And I think that's what creates incredible families in the end of the day. So, you know, when I think about my sisters and I think about why these international marriages are so beautiful in that they create a bridge of love, a bridge for peace building. And I think internationals are absolutely crucial to that because it kind of forces us, you know, to speak and interact. And in our church, marry people that might think differently than we do. And it really kind of pushes us to refrain from demonizing what we don't know. Many times my father blessed enemy countries together, quote unquote, you know, Koreans with Japanese. These two countries absolutely detest each other. But my father encouraged the Koreans to be blessed to Japanese to create a bridge for peace building so that the country of Korea and the country of Japan can learn to really love each other through their children. And my father, a couple decades ago, would joke about how because of these international blessings, you know, one day Japan, you know, the Korean culture will dominate the country of Japan. Korean food, Korean singing, Korean artistry. And, you know, if you were a Japanese back then, 30 or 40 years ago, you would have absolutely laughed at Reverend Moon for saying such an idiotic thing. But fast forward 30 and 40 years later, when you go to Japan, the most celebrated cuisine is Korean. They love Korean food and they love K-pop. And who would have thought that something like that would have taken place in a matter of decades? And so I see these international blessings as an incredible vehicle of creating peace and unity in this world. So despite the initial shock or despite the initial fear that we might have in thinking, oh my goodness, all the framework that I thought was solid, almost like a prison bar, are being, are being cast aside. And what will happen to my children? What will happen to your children? As long as we have a loving relationship or bonds of love with our children will be great men and women of God. And so instead of thinking about all of these bars or all of these safety net or crutches or frameworks that we felt comfortable with breaking away, think about it as really God breaking down the barriers or the walls that we've had in our church. And frankly, there has been so much unnecessary suffering. And, the first gen sacrificed a great deal to prepare the foundation for the next gen. But shouldn't every generation get better? Not have to suffer through the same thing every generation? Well, what kind of a progress or a non-progress would that be? So, even if our situation is difficult, the meaning of true love is really being able to be happy for the others in our lives, the children, or the newly minted blessed couples that have a better chance at really building a beautiful family. Much easier than the path that maybe we had to go through. But it's in our ability to really be compassionate, really live a life of altruism, thinking about the other. So if the future of our movement has more freedom, has more options, has more opportunity to really be happy. Not just believe that we can be happy, but actually be loving life throughout their life. Isn't that worth it? For me, it absolutely is. So I think it's the dawn of a new era and a new chapter in our in the history of our church, and I look forward to the future with great anticipation. And so this incredible blessing on 9/12 is monumental when we understand all the things that has been taking place in the context of true family. And the amazing thing is that we never stop growing. Parents grow because of children, children grow because of parents, but immersed in true love, we never stop growing. And that's the beauty of life. So don't be afraid of change, welcome it as an opportunity to grow some more. And some growing might be more painful than others, but in the end, we will be better for it. We will be better parents for it. We will be better couples for it. And our children will be better for it. So God bless and have a great week. Bye-bye.
If you guys don't like to get up for this one, we don't mind. Johnny, take a walk with your sister in the moon. Let her pay light in to fill up your room. You've been living underground, eating from the can. You've been running away from what you can't understand. She's skipping, turning down. Is she gonna be there when you hit the ground? Hey, it's alright, it's alright, it's alright. When she moves in mysterious ways. If you wanna kiss the sky, you better learn how to kneel on your knees, boy. It's just the way she turns the tide. She sees the man inside a child. Yeah. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. She moves in mysterious ways. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. She moves in mysterious ways. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. Lift my days and light up my nights, One day you will look back and you'll see where you were held. How bad is love? While you could stand there, you could move on this moment. Follow this feeling. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. She moves in mysterious ways. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. She moves in mysterious ways. Spirits moving, spirits moving. She moves in mysterious ways. Spirits moving, spirits moving. Right. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright. Lift my days and light up my nights with love.
If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below the video or go to enginemoon.com and use the contact form. And for those of you joining us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our email list. In that way, you will be updated with all the happenings at our home church. Thank you. Take care.